Hello everyone, it's Patri. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be recommending some books for y'all to read in 2023. Basically just some of my favorite books from the past 2 years. So yeah, if you're looking for something to read, keep watching. Alright, so the first book I'm going to be talking about is The Heart is a Lonely Hunter by Carson McCullers. I read this book in 2022 and honestly I'm so surprised that this book is not talked about more in modern classic literature discussions and that Carson McCullers herself is not talked about more. To give y'all a little glimpse of this genius and mistreated woman, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter was her first novel and she wrote it just at the age of 23, which is insane. She ended up writing 11 novels in her lifetime, along with short stories, essays, plays, and poems. Reading about her makes me so sad. I feel like she was misunderstood and truly ahead of her time. Her husband was jealous of her success. He was attempting to be an author as well and did not reach the same success as she did. And he basically made her life hell. They got divorced and then remarried, and she struggled a lot with her mental health. She attempted to take her own life once, didn't succeed, and then her husband tried to convince her to take her own life with him, like a suicide pact. So if that gives you an idea of how horrible he was and probably like the mental strain this woman was in, it's just unbelievable. She also struggled with sexuality and finding herself in the 40s and 50s. She dated both men and women, and in her autobiography she explains how one of her greatest loves was a woman, and unfortunately it was unreciprocated. But yeah, just a lot of pain and just sadness in her life. I could just keep talking about her, but this is not a Carson McCullers video. I truly encourage y'all to read about her, to appreciate this woman who was decades ahead of her time. Alright, now let's talk about the novel. The Heart is a Lonely Hunter is considered a Southern Gothic. Her novel feels like traveling back to the past. She explores race and political conflicts, injustices, and particularly the feeling of entrapment that existed in the South. If you were Black, Native American, a woman, disabled, or simply just poor, you had very limited ways of escaping the South, and she really captures that in this book. So this novel takes place in rural Georgia in the 30s, and we're following 4 people: John Singer, a deaf man, Mick Kelly, a teenage girl, Jake Blount, an alcoholic, and Dr. Benedict May Copeland. We follow these characters as they each form a friendship with John Singer. That is all I'm going to say about the plot to not give too much away, but we basically learn of the hopelessness and isolation a lot of Americans felt in the South. I read this quote as I researched that I thought perfectly captured what I'm trying to say, and I'll just leave y'all with that before moving on to the next book. McCullers' novel centers on the plight of the powerless and forgotten, whether through gender, class, sexual, or racial oppression. The next book I'll be talking about I read about 1.5 years ago, and I constantly wonder why it's not talked about more, and maybe it is and I just haven't been looking at the right things, but it's A Portrait of a Mirror by Natasha Joukovsky. This novel is a modern take on the myth of Narcissus. The myth of Narcissus was written by Ovid, a Roman poet, and appears on book 3 of Ovid's Metamorphoses. The myth tells the story of Narcissus and Echo. Narcissus was the beautiful son of a river god and a nymph, and everyone that came across him would fall in love with him. Echo, a nymph, fell in love as soon as she saw him, and he rejected her. The gods, angered by Narcissus' inability to return any affection, drew vengeance upon him. While on a hunt, Narcissus saw his reflection on the water and fell in love with what he saw. The fact that he couldn't have this beautiful image only made him fall in love with himself more, and unable to leave this great love of his, he sat and stared. Refusing to eat or drink or move, he eventually died. So the novel follows 2 couples, Wes and Diana, and Dale and Vivian, that are from East Coast high society. Wes and Diana live in New York, and Dale and Vivian live in Philadelphia. The 4 of them have a past with one another as they all went to the same boarding school, and the decisions that they make at the school impact the rest of their lives. I don't want to give too much of the plot away because it'll spoil the fun, but let's just say their paths cross. It has drama, love, wittiness, cleverness, and an ability to pull you into the life of these characters and simultaneously sympathize and judge. It's basically 300 pages of commentary on the hypocrisy of appearances and what we in our modern day society go through to keep up with them. I think this novel is so fun because it makes so many allusions and implications that leave you pondering. It's definitely a book that can be reread, and each time her comparisons to other works of literature would make more sense. However, don't be scared off by that. It is still accessible, and not understanding certain of her allusions does not hinder the enjoyment of the book. I also think the author does a good job of getting the point of the story through to the reader. I think when I first read it, I compared it to a Gossip Girl, and now I'm gonna add that it's kind of like a modern day Age of Innocence. If you know Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton, that's what I'm talking about. You know, scandal, rich people drama, New York high society, you know the vibe. I had so much fun reading this book, and I encourage y'all to pick it up if it sounds like something you would enjoy. The next book I'll be talking about is truly one of my all-time favorite books. I read this book about 7 months ago, and I still think of it often. Y'all know those TikTok videos, the sad girlhood / womanhood ones, like with the paintings and the poetry and the quotes and the sad music, you know those? Yeah, that's what this book is about. The novel is The Awakening by Kate Chopin. This book takes place in New Orleans and the Louisiana Gulf Coast in the late 19th century. It follows the psychology of a woman, Edna Pontellier, as she comes to terms with who she truly wants to be. Unfortunately, due to the rules of society at the time, which the book criticizes, she doesn't have many options. She is married and she is a mother, but she doesn't really feel any satisfaction from this. Rather, she feels kind of empty and lost in her role. We see her battle with love, her marriage, motherhood, and womanhood. Even though this takes place in the 19th century and a lot has changed for women since, I still believe that a lot of the themes and turmoils that Edna struggles with can be applied to women's experiences in the 21st century. When the book came out in 1899, it was very controversial. The reason for this is spoiled in the summary of the book. I personally believe that part of the experience of reading the book is not knowing what makes it so controversial. If you want to know, feel free to look up the summary. But basically, it was so controversial because of the scandalous themes that Kate Chopin brings up in the novel. Along with The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, The Awakening is part of my literary fiction scratch-off poster that I've got here. They're all scratch-offs for books written by women. It's called Women of Letters, so yay, that's exciting. The next book I'll be talking about is Freedom by Jonathan Franzen. I read this book about 1.5 years ago and I absolutely loved it and still do. A little bit of background on Jonathan Franzen. He is an essayist and novelist, and most if not all his books have been highly praised. One of his novels, The Correction, was a Pulitzer Prize finalist for fiction. So knowing this, I went into Freedom with high expectations and it did not disappoint. This quote on the front cover says, "A masterpiece of American fiction," and I could not agree more. In this novel, we are following a married couple, Patty and Walter Berglund, and as a side character, we're also following their son, Joey. The novel is written by Patty, and she tells the story of her childhood, her college experience where she meets Walter, and of her marriage. A lot happens in this novel, but it explores the hardships of marriage, motherhood, parenthood, teenage angst, political conflicts, climate change, etc., etc. Like, so many themes. So much is captured in this novel that it's hard to give you an idea of what it's about, but it captures the end of the early 2000s and the beginnings of the 2010s so well. This book is funny, witty, addicting, and powerful. I could not set it down while I was reading it. I really couldn't. I am amazed at how Jonathan Franzen was able to write such an amazing, evoking, and captivating story. And again, I've heard this from a lot of his other books, but it's just a really cool experience, like getting to read a book of his. Like, how can a brain connect so many different things and say so much by just telling the story of a couple? I do not know. I don't understand. It's truly amazing. Like, what? I'm going to read a couple of the quotes in the back so y'all can understand what I mean. The great American novel. One of the best living American novelists. Epic. Hugely ambitious. Freedom is very, very good. Brilliant and extraordinary stylist. Consuming and extraordinarily moving. A work of total genius. A page turner that engages the mind. A surprisingly moving and even hopeful epic. A tour de force. Sweeping and powerful, immense and unforgettable, deeply moving and superbly crafted. A literary genius. Freedom is the novel of the year and the century. The first great American novel of the post-Obama era. I also just found out that it's going to be a TV show, so super excited for that. The last book I'll be talking about is Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough, and I read this book about 2 weeks ago and I was obsessed. As with all these books, I absolutely loved it and I could not put this down. We are following Louise, a single mom, and Adelph, a stay-at-home wife, and they both live in London. Louise doesn't really do much other than work and be a mom, but one night she decides to go out and she meets a man. On this night out, they hit it off and they share a kiss. The following week, she goes to work and realizes that the man she met at the bar is now her new boss, her new married boss. He is married to Adele. Throughout the novel, we are jumping back and forth between Adele and Louise's point of view, and so the story unfolds. This story is a dark suspense novel and it's classified as psychological fiction, and I guarantee you will not see the end coming. You will not. When I finished reading this book, I could not stop thinking about it and I literally felt nauseous, just like with the knowledge that us readers have that the main characters don't. I'm being vague on purpose, but just give this book a chance if you're ever in a reading slump or just wanting to read something that you will not be able to set down. Give it a chance. It was also turned into a TV show about 2 years ago, so that was really fun to watch right after reading it. I feel like they do a really good job of staying true to the story. Like, the dialogue is quite literally the same as the novels. But yeah, super fun book. I highly recommend. This is it for the video. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Please let me know if you have read or will read any of these. I hope you guys have a wonderful day or night, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!